Welcome to Creating Connection with me, your host, Dr. T, where we will navigate being human together. We'll do this through conversations, exploring the challenges and joys of life, uncovering insights and strategies to create meaningful connections, to foster personal growth and find solace in the collective wisdom of our diverse community. Drawing from a unique blend of academic expertise and personal experiences, I will dive into the joys and complexities of aging, death, dying, grief, and body image with a blend of humor and compassion and understanding. We will forge connections that transcend geographical boundaries and unite us in our shared humanity. When we come together, the possibilities are endless. Creating Connection with me, Dr. T, starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. T, and you're listening to Creating Connection on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with me for the next hour as I talk about people-pleasing and boundaries. Am I a people-pleasing and boundaries expert? No, not by training, but just by deep investigation over the course of my life. So this episode is very personal. I'll be sharing some stories, but also some facts and resources that I hope will help you if you are struggling with these issues as well. I first kind of started my journey on this road by listening to a podcast years and years and years and years ago. Some people were talking, I don't remember the podcast, I wish I could. And the way they were describing something, I thought, oh my gosh, like this is me. This is what I'm like, how do they know this? And then they used the word codependent, and I was like, I had never heard of that word, and I was probably had to have been in my 30s at the time, so I made it all that way without knowing that term and how it applied to me in my life. So I did a deep dive. There's a kind of a cornerstone book that's by Melody Beatty called Codependent No More. So I went into that work. I started kind of looking at like how I did that. And of course, then the pendulum swings, right? So, it's like, oh, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna be dependent or codependent on people. And so then you swing one way. And over the years since then, so I guess that would be, let's say, for easy math, 20 years, I've been exploring this topic in different facets. Through books, through other people's information and teaching on Instagram. So I'll have that whole list of resources in the show notes. So like I said, this is very personal for me. So the introduction. So we're going to be talking about people pleasing and boundaries, and I see them as going very much hand in hand. Because once you identify and become aware that maybe that you're doing these behaviors and they're not optimal, then you need to start setting boundaries, which can feel very, very scary. And so I just want to share just a personal anecdote before we get into everything, where this culminated just last year. I had a friend who wanted me to go to our high school class reunion. And my first response was no. And then when asked again, it was not a chance. And then my voice was saying things like, support her. She's your friend. You're back in town in Minnesota again. You wouldn't have been able to do this when you were living in Reno. But I kept checking in with myself, and it just really wasn't where I wanted to be that evening. And I would do that kind of mental gymnastics. Well, I mean, but I could, or I could just go for a little bit, or and my husband, God love him, was willing to do whatever. He's like, I'll go or not go. But when I kept checking in, and that's what I've been learning over the years, right? And I'm putting my hands on my solar plexus right now, but like to check in, like, what is the yes? What is the no for me? And again, these are low stakes, right? It's going to a high school class reunion. It is not, when someone really is in need of something. So I want to just really emphasize that this episode is not like about the big things, like where maybe something really huge happens, and even though you don't want to do it, even though your gut is saying no, the need of the other person supersedes that. So I'm not talking about the big things, but it is the little things that are kind of the building blocks to maybe a peaceful and easeful daily life, And again, it is a privilege to be able to talk about these things. So just to level set. So, that's why I wanted to start with this example, right? Because it is a reunion. Yeah, there's no stakes. Maybe, my friend really wanted me to go, and we, because besties, that's where we met in high school. And how cool is it that we're friends all these years later? I just did not want to be in, I didn't want to be in a social setting like that evening. So I did, kept checking in. And so I did choose me, which is kind of a weird thing to say, and true. I chose my comfort, my desires for that evening, to honor myself. And what was amazing was that it gave myself some feeling of like, oh wow, like I listened to myself. And I had this great evening at home with my husband, and it was actually self-care and taking care of myself. What was also amazing was that my friend did decide to go, and she had a great time. She connected with people, she was talking to people and reconnecting, and I don't know for sure. Of course, I can't know this for sure, but I suspect that had my husband and I gone there, because we're such close friends with her and her husband, we might have just been tempted to sit at a table and catch up ourselves. And so in this way, she was able to talk to a lot more people. And, you know, I didn't go there, because I didn't want to, and I didn't need to save her or do that for her, because she was able to do these things on her own. And she chose to go. And so when I look at it in this light, it's kind of mind-boggling to me, the absolute pain I've caused myself over the years, and most likely in my people pleasing, either holding people back or showing up and being resentful. And it's not that I'm the end all be all, because that's not true. But because I hadn't been willing to be with my own discomfort in saying no, I would say yes, and then I would shoulder the discomfort of being somewhere I didn't want to be. And it is freeing. So I offer that as, just a small example of where I've been playing with people pleasing and boundaries in my own life. So just to understand people pleasing a little bit more, um, so the definition that I found when doing the research on this is, people pleasing is when a person prioritizes others' needs, desires, or approval over their own, often to their detriment. People pleasers typically avoid conflict, seek validation, and may struggle to say no even when they should. And I want to pause here because as I was starting this journey, you know, those are not, people, who avoid conflict. It's not very flattering to think of that, but it's true, and it was to be validated, and I did struggle to say no even when I should. And so, prioritizing other people's needs and desire or trying to seek their approval over my own detriment, that is harmful. And so I found this quote. Oh, by the way, I have a whole folder of Instagram quotes and things called boundaries saved in my Instagram account. But I love this one from Show Me. It says, overextending yourself doesn't make people appreciate you more. Unfortunately, it makes them value your time and comfort a lot less. People pleasing is a race to the bottom, a race to the bottom. And this idea of overextending yourself doesn't make people appreciate you more. I really thought that it would, right? And maybe for those listening, you might be like, "Hey, now, um, they should appreciate me because I am going out of my way to do something. I am doing something at a detriment to myself for them. So that should allow them or have them see how much I value them." And it really does, I think over time make people value your time and comfort less because they know that you're willing to do that at any drop of the hat. So I love this quote, and I want to go into common characteristics. Oh, and I also want to say that I have a bit of a cold that I'm getting over. So if I sound a little nasally or congested, that's what's going on. And but I'm fine. I'm on the backside of it. So common characteristics of people pleasing. Difficulty saying no. Now in one of my episodes, I'm blanking on it right now. But I talked about the four tendencies, and this book by Gretchen Rubin was another big leap in my process. And I did title this episode Actively Recovering People Pleaser, because I don't say that I'm recovered fully. I am actively recovering, because given a time or situation, it's not necessarily easy. So this first one, difficulty saying no. In the four tendencies, I'm an obliger, which makes up, about 51% of the population. This book is, it talks about how you respond to inner and outer expectations. And as an obliger, my first thing would be to say yes. Someone asked me to do something, I say yes. So that really like kind of went hand in hand with this difficulty to say no. How the book helped me was realizing that all of the other three tendencies don't have that expectation of hearing a yes. They ask, and for them, it could be yes or no. Are you kidding me right now? Like, are you kidding me right now? That was bananas to me. So with that, I did start practicing saying no more. And my dissertation chair had made a crack to a class that I was talking. I gave a kind of a little mini lecture in mindful leadership, a mindful leadership course. And she made the crack that she didn't like that I learned how to say no, because I did start saying no to things, and it can be uncomfortable for people around you if they are used to you saying yes. But the feeling inside after you get over like that scariness is really amazing, to say like, I choose me. And we'll get into that as I'm going on. So other characteristics, constantly seeking approval or validation. Now, I wasn't aware that I was doing this. Now looking back, I can see for sure I was, but I was not aware of it at the time. Fear of conflict or upsetting other people. I don't think I could have named this either, but it is there, because often, at least for the conflict side with me and some of the different personalities and people I dated over the years, the personalities of the people I dated over the years, that fear of conflict or upsetting, I would be like, I'd say yes, because I didn't want them to be mad. And I didn't, and it could be as simple as, a friend group going to the friend's cabin, and my boyfriend at the time, saying, who was like jealous and possessive, saying no. And so then I didn't go to the cabin. I missed out on this, kind of core memory that some of my high school friends share from that time, because I didn't want to create conflict within my romantic relationship. So then I stayed home and kind of sucked it up. And that is a great example of that for me as I look back. Tendency to agree with others even when they disagree internally. And that is interesting, because sometimes it's like well, I agree to disagree, or you don't even say that out loud. This could come up around the holidays, when you're with family members who might have different views than you do. And sometimes that's wise, right? So wise speech, and again, I have to make sure I see this. So this tattoo that I have, I'm holding up my right arm, and it says thankful, and it's a reminder of the gates of speech from Buddhism. So the T is to ask yourself before you say something, is it timely and is it true? Is it necessary? That's the N. Is it kind? And then, is it useful? And so, yes, I had this like marked onto my skin because I needed that big of a reminder. So there might be times when it is skillful to not say something, right? But just look at the tendency overall. And are you allowing yourself to be known and seen, if you're only just agreeing with other people versus voicing your own opinions or your own thoughts? Another common characteristic is neglecting personal needs and boundaries to accommodate others. So, I kind of wrapped this example in with the fear of conflict, but I think they all kind of stack on each other. So, neglecting personal needs and boundaries to accommodate others, and feeling responsible for other people's feelings or happiness. Wow, like this brought me right to this classic scene from New Girl. It's a TV show. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend. It's very sweet. I think I've watched it a couple times all the way through now. But Jessica Day, the main character, said something like, "I don't want to hurt their feelings," to Schmidt. And Schmidt said, "Hurt their feel? Do you just walk around all day thinking about other people's feelings?" Jessica then says, "Yeah, don't you?" And Schmidt said, "How do you get anything done?" And Jessica said, "It's hard." And so this idea of, of like, I am responsible for other people's feelings, it comes from probably the causes and conditions of everything that has, brought you to where you are right now. But this idea that you're responsible for their feelings or happiness, I highly relate with that character's assessment. It is exhausting, and it is something that I have a natural tendency to do, scanning the environment, making sure everyone's okay. And if you're doing that as well, something that I've been practicing with is, just saying like, I actually, in my, either in my head, or if I'm not around someone, I might say like, "This is mine," and I'm, kind of moving my hands towards myself, and "This is yours," and I'm moving my hands towards someone else, like, really trying to unweave and untangle this idea of, where am I responsible? Am I responsible? I'm not responsible for their happiness. And if something, and we'll get into this more with boundaries, but that feeling responsible can lead to people pleasing. So there's ways to kind of shift and untangle. But again, under all of this is this tendency to need to be, not tendency to, but the need to be aware of kind of your motivations, what's happening when you're interacting with people, and learning those feelings in your own body. So some psychological roots of people-pleasing behavior could be fear of rejection. This could be from past experience where rejection was painful. People pleasers may go out of their way to be liked or accepted to avoid those feelings again. A desire for approval. This could come from growing up in environments where approval was conditional or hard to come by, and that can lead to an ingrained need for external validation. And I'll talk a lot more about external validation down in the boundary section. And low self-esteem. So people who lack confidence may seek affirmation from others, using people pleasing as a way to feel worthy or valued. And then it could just be, childhood conditioning. So children who were praised for being good or compliant, they might carry behaviors of like this into adulthood, equating people pleasing with being loved or accepted. And so, all of these are kind of, you can see how they all play together, right? Fear of rejection, desire for approval, low self-esteem, and childhood conditioning. you know can it be maybe just one thing? Sure, but maybe in most cases I would think it's a multiple aspects. But you'll have to, if you are struggling with this, thinking about maybe where the root of it is. Not that we can change the past, but we can move forward with some awareness, and that can help us understand, like, okay, if it was childhood conditioning, I'm not a child anymore. Right now, I'm 54 years old, and something that I say to myself often is, this is my life, and I am allowed to live my life, which I don't know if that sounds wild to everybody, but it's so simple. and not easy, and it really is a practice. Um, a woman that I follow on Instagram, Haley Page McGee. She also has a book out. She's great quotes, great information on boundaries. But this one came up the other day. Whoops, I spent my life thinking that my overgiving and conflict aversion was altruism, only to realize that it had nothing to do with other people and everything to do with the fact that I learned that I would only be safe if everyone around me liked and approved of me. Whoops. Yeah, and I have friends who, we are in that process of discovery together, and so we're often sending these back and forth to each other. So I sent it to my friend Crystal, shout out Crystal, and and I said, whoops. And she wrote back, whoops. So yeah, it is an interesting thing to be able to think like, oh, I am doing this. I'm doing this behavior. I'm, denying my own needs. And that means I'm a good person and it's altruistic. But when you like start drilling down and digging down, it really had nothing to do with other people and everything to do with the fact that I learned that it would be only safe if everyone around liked and approved of me. Um, and that's hard actually to say out loud. I'd like to be this, some person who's just like, oh, I'm fully, fully content and I'm not looking for outside approval. But it's a journey, and the journey has thankfully led me here where I can share some of this knowledge with people, and hopefully that, maybe somewhere down the line, 20 years down the line, someone will say, I listened to a podcast. I don't know who it was, but they talked about things that I was able to see in myself, because change, true change and lasting change does come with awareness, and it comes with that self-knowledge. And so just allowing that piece to be there with the four tendencies and saying no, or realizing that my tendency was to say yes. An example that I love to share is that my husband, we had two older dogs at the time, and he said, I think one day he was like, I think the dogs need at least two good walks a day. And in my mind, before he doesn't say anything about me, but I start immediately like going like, okay, reviewing my schedule. When can I get two walks in a day? Okay, I don't really like walking them together because of I'm like, and I'm like doing this mental gymnastics trying to figure this out. But with this book in mind, I paused and I said, wait, are you asking me to take the dogs for two walks a day? Complete shock on his part. And he was like, no, like they're both of our dogs. Like, why would it just be on you? And so I like that example of just allowing yourself to start getting curious, start asking people like, oh, is this what you meant? Once you start realizing that you're twisting yourself into a pretzel to try and, either people please or make someone happy. And if you just have like, that was such a simple question, like, did you really mean for me to do this? And when he was like, no, I come back to that example so often in my own life as I practice these things. So where people pleasing might show up in different relationships. And so it might be not across the board, and it might be in certain areas where either you kind of want that approval or it feels scary you'd been rejected. So when you think of different areas where this might play out, or different relationships, this could be in the workplace. As an employee, you might take on extra work or agree to unfair demands from bosses or colleagues to avoid conflict, or to be seen as a team player, even if it means working late or sacrificing personal time. I had a job that led me to this place in my life, but I had taken this job, and uh, when I wanted to take a vacation day, I would then have to come in on the weekend or stay late to make up the time. So it never was time off. It was wild, but there was this like this insecurity that I felt with this workplace, and kind of with the feedback, either direct or indirect, that I was getting. And so I would work late, I would sacrifice personal time, and I was miserable. I cried almost every day at lunch on that job, and thankfully that is now in my rearview mirror. But I do remember that feeling. It could also be in the family. So a person might always say yes to family requests, even if they're inconvenient or burdensome, out of fear of disappointing family members or causing friction. And I've heard people say, well, it's family, you just do it. It's family, you just do it. And but not often pausing to say, like, is this realistic? And I too am a part of this family. And so really what I'm inviting in this conversation is to include yourself in the circle of care. So whenever you're thinking about these things, it's like, oh, I too am a family member, and I too am a colleague, and would I do this, or would I expect this of other people? And it's not to say that you can't help out, because, in the show Letterkenny, cute show. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend it, and use subtitles because it's about kind of a small town in Canada. Anyways, but they say, if a friend asks for help, you help them. And this has become kind of like a little shorthand in my family with my husband. A friend asks for help, you help them. And it is true. So you show up for people. I'm not saying don't show up for people, but do pay attention to, if you are always saying yes and it doesn't feel even, and it doesn't feel kind of balanced, or that you are kind of thought about in the equation. And then in friendships, some people might go along with a friend's plans, even when they don't want to avoid being left out or judged negatively. Now, I didn't think I'd be judged negatively by my friend that I didn't go to the reunion, but there was some FOMO, and then there was also some JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. So FOMO is the fear of missing out, and JOMO is the joy of missing out. But I have in the past gone along with people's plans, even when I didn't want to. And I, at this second half of my life, I don't want to do that anymore. And I can feel the inner conflict, or I can feel kind of the churning up that I get. And I'll talk about this with boundaries, but I can feel that. But then the relief, or the feeling of really expansiveness in my own experience when I say yes to myself. Because really, when you're saying no to other people, you're saying yes to yourself, or you're saying yes to something else. So it is something to think about, what you are saying yes to, which means you're saying no to something, what you're saying no to, which means you're saying yes to something. And I think that that's an important piece of it. So the consequences of people pleasing, there's an emotional and psychological toll. Anxiety, resentment, burnout. We talked about burnout in one of our episodes. I didn't write that one down. I felt so proud of myself because I wrote down other episodes. Anyways, I'll get to that, and then I'll point that out to you. But we did talk about burnout. There's some great books on that. And so people pleasing can have these emotional and psychological effects. So anxiety, where you're constantly worrying about what others think, and whether you're meeting their expectation. This can cause lots of anxiety, and it could, manifest into things like sleep disturbance, or digestive issues, or headaches. And so even if you are just starting your journey, start paying attention to your body, because your body might likely tell you ahead of time. So, that you're feeling this anxiety, that you are people pleasing and saying yes when you should be saying no. Um, there could be feelings of resentment. So over time, constant giving without receiving can lead to deep-seated resentment. People pleasers might begin to feel taken advantage of or underappreciated, which can cause strain in relationship. And so thinking again, to the four tendencies in this learning no, and also nonviolent communication. We had Aya on, and yeah, anyways, another episode. I will get to that. It's farther down in my notes. I should have had it up farther. Um, anyways, so resentment. Aya had said to me, I said something to her. She was my nonviolent communication coach. I said to her, I'll just go, I'll suck it up. And she then said to me, would you want someone to just go and suck it up and spend time with you, whether it's a coffee or a dinner or lunch, or to help you? And I was like, no, my God, I would rather like be home by myself. I'd rather be doing other things. I don't want people to suck it up to spend time with me. And so that resentment can be one-sided, right? Like, so, maybe if I just said no, they're like, sweet, I don't have to leave my house either. And it can be kind of that mutual thing. I have a dear friend, Kim, that, years ago, we had plans, and neither one of us wanted to cancel our plans. And so but neither one of us wanted to do those plans. And so we both showed up, and it was making cookies for Valentine's Day. The cookies got burnt. It was just off. The whole night was off. And then later on, we made the agreement to only get together when we absolutely both wanted to get together. It's beautiful. That way, I never have to think about that. I'm never sucking it up. And it was a no harm, no foul. Like, it doesn't matter why we're not getting together, but either one of us can say, like, I'm just not into it, or I just don't feel like it today. So when we are together, there's just this freedom of knowing, like, oh, we both want to be here and we're not sucking it up. So watch for those feelings of resentment, because the person on the other end might not even know that you're saying yes when you mean no, because you're so good at saying yes. And so then you kind of start, getting all this resentment and irritation at these people, and they don't need that. They don't deserve that, even if they don't know about it. And then burnout, and that can be through that effort of meeting people's needs while neglecting your own. So this does lead to burnout, and it's especially true if people pleasing extends into work environments where the pressure to perform and please can be intense. So burnout can result in exhaustion, both mentally and physically, and make it difficult to function in daily life. And so this is also where, including yourself in that circle of care, right? So this, and I've talked to a lot of care providers and care partners in different webinars and talks that I've done, that the burnout, because they do have to say yes, they are in a caring position, but they have to start including themselves in that circle of care, or it is burnout. And then this quote from Whitney Cummings: make sure it's your problem before trying to fix it. So make sure it's your problem before trying to fix it. And I know that, I care deeply about the people in my life. So when I hear that they're having an issue, my first response is to want to fix it. And maybe it's not mine to figure out. On one retreat, I came up with my 3 F's, and it is, so my other than my first favorite F word, I came up with this mantra to ask myself, is it mine to fight, fix, or figure out? So fight, is it mine to fight, fix, or figure out? Because this idea of, wanting to jump in, it can be exhausting, as I had quoted from the New Girl show. And so is it your problem before trying to fix it? That doesn't mean that you can't be a sounding board. It doesn't mean that you can't, give someone your time and energy to listen, but think about it before you start jumping in and trying to fix it. And so this, can have an impact on relationships and self-esteem. Self-esteem, constantly prioritizing other needs over your own, can erode self-esteem, which is interesting because it likely started from a low self-esteem place in the first place, that you're people pleasing. So it becomes this kind of never ending circle. People pleasers, again, may feel that their worth is dependent on others' approval, leading to a fragile sense of self. And when you have a fragile sense of self and you don't know what your needs are, it's really hard to set those boundaries. And I just, want to say that when I practice these things, there's some liberation and freedom that is kind of larger than the situation. So another thing that comes up is that, one night, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I noticed the garage light on. My husband had left it on. Normally, I might go turn it off, or get in bed and then be mad at him and defensive when he came in and saying, being prepared to say, like, you didn't shut off the light. This isn't mine. And instead, I didn't shut off the light. I just got into bed and I was cozy, and then had I done when I think about it, like, had I done it the way I normally would have, I either would have wanted over the top affirmation of how awesome I am, because that is a toxic trait of mine. I want to be appreciated, and not that appreciation is bad, but I would have wanted him to be like, "Oh my gosh, you turned off the light. You're so amazing." Or I'd be defensive because I was feeling guilty that I didn't do it. And I think about it, he didn't ask me to do that. This was all made up in my head. This was all made up in my head. He left the light on, he gets to turn it off, and I don't have to feel guilty. And he can walk in and be bummed that he had to turn off the light, and that's okay too. Like that was like such a mind-blowing thing, because again, that's like, okay, if he's bummed that he has to turn off the light, and it wasn't out of anger, and it wasn't out of like, I'll show him, and he has to clean up his own messes. It wasn't. It was so neutral, you guys. It was amazing. And then you know what? He just came in, went out, turned off the light. There was no commentary. Like nothing. Like it was all in my head. And so like practicing these things and allowing and going like, okay, this might be uncomfortable, but just like breathing through it, knowing like the intentions like behind mine were good, and I wasn't swinging that pendulum all the way over to like making him bad and wrong. I was able to just do what I wanted to do, which was not go turn off the light. And I'm talking like, and in that house, to turn off the garage light, you had to go like outside and out to the garage. Anyway, so this is just, this idea of making things up in my head, denying my own needs, which was to not go back outside. And so and it's this weird dichotomy, right? So I learned people pleasing in order to get my needs met. But in people pleasing, I learned to deny my own needs. And so rather than having my needs met from another person, um, that's a lot of pressure to put on them. So what I've been practicing and working with is like nurturing and nourishing myself and caring for my needs the way I care for others' needs, deeply, lovingly, and attentively. So in order to do that, I have to stop people pleasing and say no to create that quality time with myself. So what I've found with this idea of like meeting my own needs, and it's not this rugged individualism, because we are interdependent, and I love helping people, and I love receiving support. But I'm talking about these kind of basic, reaffirming needs, so that it's not in this twisted way to try and get needs met. It's more in a clear request mode. And so this is unwinding a pattern. And at each time I do it, I can breathe just a little easier. It feels a little more spacious, a little less scary. Um, Sometimes a lot scary, but I do get to be me. It's my life, my one experience in this body, in this time, in this location, with these particular loves, friends, heartaches, challenges, successes, and lessons learned. It boggles my mind with such gratitude, awe, and appreciation. So I like to try and breathe with that. Like, this is our lives, you know, and we're interdependent, by giving and receiving from a place of openness, generosity, and ease, and knowing that it's safe to say no when it is a no. learning to trust that my needs are sacred and that they'll be met. And that doesn't mean that everyone outside of me will meet those needs. It's allowing myself to meet my own needs. This gives me so much more ease, and it does feel good. And I don't have to demand or cajole or wish and resent. And so, like wishing and resenting, it's and maybe I'll just ask, how many people listening have been in situations where it feels scary to ask for a need to be met? So they wish things were different, someone would read their mind or just know, and then they resent when it doesn't go the way that they hoped. So when I trust and relax and stay open, I can more easily identify my needs and ask for them to be met or meet them myself. It's simple, it's straightforward. And if the other person can't or won't meet that request for whatever reason, they're safe to do so because they're not being met with fights or a cold shoulder or punitive behavior. They get to say. So when I trust that they will say what they mean and I don't have to second guess, oh my gosh, that is such a good feeling. And it's something I value in all of my relationships. And I'm just now realizing that I can create that for myself and others by letting them know that they're safe to request and safe to say no. And the same goes for me and all people. That might be going down a rabbit hole a little bit too much, but it's this idea of, you know, I'm not trying to coerce someone to meet my needs. I can meet my needs by saying no, staying home when I don't want to go out, or I can make a request, and that can be met with a no because they're an autonomous being, and okay, like it doesn't have to be this minefield that it had been for the first half of my life. And so I do want to say, like, as we go into boundaries, um, that there are distinctions because though boundaries can feel very scary, speaking from personal experience, it has literally, now that I've been aware of my habits and inclinations, I noticed that there have been times where I say no, and in the back of my mind, it had gotten to a point where I'm like, well, okay, I have to say no because this doesn't work for me. And if the relationship's over, the relationship's over. Talk about a swing. Like, talk about a wild, wild swing to, like saying no and only saying no when I thought I'd be okay if the relationship would be over, or I was not even okay with the relationship being over, but I was steeling myself to that. Like, okay, well, if I say no, then the relationship's over. And I say that to some of my friends who don't struggle with this, and it boggles their mind. The degree to which it can feel scary to say no is intense, or it can be intense. And so I do want to say that there are distinctions between boundaries. Boundaries, requests, and ultimatums. So like a boundary is about what you or I are not willing to accept, experience, or tolerate from others. So it's a limit that you set, right? So this is about you and what you're willing to accept. A request is about what you'd like from someone else. It's an excuse me, it's an ask, it's not a rule. And so that's where I was saying earlier, the freedom in knowing, like, oh, I can make this request and it can be a yes or a no, either way, which is freeing to both people. So that's a request. Um, but in order to have clear boundaries, you do have to have awareness. In order to take care of yourself, you need to have awareness. And how does that awareness start? Because again, when you think about the people pleasing and you think about denying your needs for other people and paying attention to other people over yourself, it starts by checking in. Where do you feel like when it's a heck yeah, like where do you feel that in your body? And actually pause and go like, oh, this is a yes. And when it's a no, or when you even start trying to do those mental gymnastics, what does that feel like in your body? For me, the heck yeah feels expansive. It feels spacious. The no, or the like, I should, feels kind of constrictive and like a lot of anxiety, a lot of mental gymnastics to be like, well, I could, and da, 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 da. And so to try and figure out like how you have the capacity for someone, you could, investigate like, how are you feeling in the moment? Are you feeling drained or overwhelmed yourself? Do you have the capacity to provide meaningful support? And then really, what else has been going on in your world? Like, have you recently dealt with a significant mental or emotional stress? And are you feeling very patient or non-judgmental? All of these things, because if we say yes to something and then we go in with this energy of, we're depleted already. I don't know about you, but I can get kind of snippy or like real short. And that again is telling. And so, how to tell where you need a boundary in your life, is that, where do you feel overextended? Where are you feeling resentful or drained? Notice your emotional reactions, paying attention to frustration, resentment, exhaustion in your interactions. These emotions can signal that your boundaries are being pushed. And even if someone doesn't know they're pushing your boundaries, right? They, because if you haven't stated them, and someone's crossing them, it's a matter of, clarity is kindness. And again, evaluate your energy levels. Notice if there's patterns of guilt. So like, do you feel guilty for saying no, or do you feel obligated to meet others' demands? That could be a sign that boundaries are needed. And also assessing your priorities. So are you sacrificing, again, your own needs, goals, or well-being to please others? Reflecting on these areas where in your life where your needs aren't being met. And that doesn't mean that someone else is supposed to meet them, right? So again, it's first like becoming aware and noticing those reactions. And then before you make an ask, either a request, you might start with a request and then go to a boundary. But if before you even can do that, you have to know what your needs are. And that's where like the nonviolent communication book has really been helpful, because it's, there's feeling wheels on the internet that you can Google and start like identifying, and it might be as that, right? People are like, well, I do that with my kids, and it's like, yeah, and you might need to do that with yourself if no one has ever done that for you, if no one's ever said like your needs are okay or it's safe to feel these things, and we'll work through them. And so, an example might be asking yourself, in what situations or relationships do I feel overwhelmed, anxious, or taken advantage of? So that can indicate where it might be needed. And then, to communicate, being clear and direct, using I statements. And again, sometimes it's not saying anything. Like me with the light switch, I just zip it. And I just was like noticing all of the things in my mind. But if there was a clear and direct ask, or something, it's like, you know, it could be something like, I need some time to myself in the evenings to recharge. So just stating that, setting limits, be clear about what is and isn't acceptable. Instead of saying I'm busy, you could say, I can't take on any new projects after 5 p.m. So being like clear. And again, that's kind of knowing yourself and what is okay and is not. And practice saying no. This is boy, oh boy, this is a practice. So get comfortable with saying no without over explaining. It's perfectly okay to set a boundary with a simple, I can't do that right now. And something I learned a long time ago was, I have my daytime or my planner, and I would often put meetings over my meetings, right? So like, and I did air quotes. Why did I? No, my meetings with myself are meetings, and that's something I'm still working on. Saying no, I have a meeting or I have an appointment, and that appointment could be, doing art with your, just, you know, having some time to read a book. And that is as important. And so noticing and playing around and practice with setting a boundary with a simple, I can't do that right now. And then be consistent, because it is important to enforce that, because this can be the hardest part. Consistency shows other people that your limits are non-negotiable, but it's also kind, right? Because if someone, if it's like sometimes yes, sometimes no, um, and I'm trying to think of like a hard set boundary. Maybe it's the work example. I don't take on new work after 5 p.m. Then on some days, if you say, oh, well, today I can. Um, I don't know. But just be consistent, especially with boundaries. It doesn't have to be with requests. You could say something like, I understand that you need my help, but I'm unable to help you assist with that right now. And allowing, again, it's like, what is mine and what is theirs? So again, it's like thinking like, what is mine to, deal with, and what is yours? You might even get pushback from people, right? You might have resistance if you're changing a long-standing pattern. People might feel surprised or upset, but that doesn't mean that your boundary is wrong. Staying calm. Just repeat your boundary calmly. Don't engage in arguments. You can just even say, like, I understand you're upset and I still need to take care of myself. Because again, that you're including yourself into that circle of care. And I can speak from this firsthand. It is normal to feel guilty at first or continually, depending on who it is, especially if you're not used to setting limits. But remind yourself that the boundaries are necessary for your well being, and it's not your responsibility to meet everyone's needs. It is not your responsibility to meet everyone's needs. It is wild. And I would so often feel uncomfortable or ashamed about needing to set boundaries, which led me to unhelpful habits, like making the other person wrong or bad in order to feel entitled, right? So it'd be like, can you believe it that this person is asking this of me again, blah, 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 instead of just acknowledging that their behavior situation doesn't work for me right now. Like, and it can, and I'm having this open-handed gesture because I had to decide that my own subjective needs are important. So letting go of right and wrong and just shifting to, this isn't aligned with my needs right now. It's no need to take it personally or assign a moral value to it. But I realize that, either in thinking like, oh, this relationship's going to be over if I say no. But it would also be like, I would kind of armor up with this like self-justification, or, like, oh, they're, can you believe that they're asking this of me again? And it's not about them, it's about me saying, oh no, I can't do that right now. Um, and so you might even, like work on telling your, self, like, I'm worthy of this. I'm worthy of taking care of my needs. I have permission to take care of my needs. It's okay if others don't understand right away. And oh, and self-compassion. I know we're kind of wrapping up here, but the role of self-compassion in boundary setting. So self-compassion is episode 9. See, I told you the episodes were real deep in my notes here. But I talk a lot about self-compassion in episode 9 of Creating Connection with Dr. T. And it is crucial when you're setting boundaries. So it helps you stay grounded, kind to yourself. You get to acknowledge your needs, give yourself permission to prioritize your own well-being, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Being gentle with your mistakes and celebrate your small wins. So I just really want you to start small and be patient. It can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if it's something new for you. And I actually encourage you to start small. Begin by setting boundaries at low stakes situations and gradually build up to more challenging ones. Be patient with yourself. This is a journey, not a one-time event. And every small step towards boundary setting is progress. And so I will have books and resources in for further reading. And I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with boundary setting. What challenges are you facing? What successes have you celebrated? I would, feel free to contact me and connect with me on social media or in through email. Your stories and feedback do help other people feel less alone in their own boundary setting journeys. Um, so again, nonviolent communication, that was episode 7. Mindful communication was with Heather Haslam, and that was episode 4. So go back and check those out if you haven't listened to those yet. And I want to end with this poem by Mary Oliver, The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. Thank you all for tuning in. I really want to invite you to take baby steps to share your thoughts on boundaries. And, the roadmap that I took was, learning the word codependent, moving out of state for me, because of my dreams. That was a big one. And then the Four Tendency book, Nonviolent Communication, episode 7, and just mindful communication, because when you can bring that mindfulness that your needs matter first. So first, identify that you too are a people pleaser, or maybe you're actively recovering, like me. Become aware of those feelings in your body, become aware when you say yes, when you mean no, and be gentle with yourself, because it is a practice and it is not easy, especially if those have been trained in you for decades, as they had in my world. So I really do want to thank you all for tuning in. And I'll leave you with one more quote. Instead, ask yourself what you love without fear of consequence, without force or shame or guilt. What motivates you to be kind, to take care of your body, your spirit, others, the earth? Trust the longing, trust the love that can be translated into action without the threat of punishment. Trust that you will not destroy what matters most. Give yourself that much. Keenan Roth. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Creating Connection with Dr. T. I'm grateful that you choose to spend this time with me. Reach out with any questions or comments or show ideas, and thank you so much for sharing my show. Join me on the first and third Wednesdays of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, and 10 a.m. Pacific. And until then, take good care of yourself and others, and I'll see you back here on September 18th. Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to Creating Connection with me, Dr. T. Tuning in on the first and third Wednesdays every month at 10 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com, where we will navigate being human together. Being human means that we all have a body, and we will all experience loss, grief, and aging if we're lucky. Let's join together on this journey of exploration, support, and mutual learning. I love bringing people together, and on Creating Connection, we are a conversation away from understanding another person and, quite frankly, ourselves. For more information, visit ccwithdrt.com.